We're in a very meaningful moment in the life of our global Catholic Church during these days. Today, in fact, in union with the Holy Father and with the Church throughout the world, we are kicking off World Week of Migrants and Refugees, which culminates next Sunday in the 111th World Day of Migrants and Refugees. That's on Sunday, October 5th. And as our Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, has recently reminded us, this is a privileged time for us as Catholics and as people of goodwill throughout the world to draw attention to the plight of our brothers and sisters who have been displaced from their homes and to raise our voices in support of their basic rights and dignity. And we here at St. Thomas More Chapel and Center have decided to respond to this call of our Holy Father by inviting our good friend, Father Luis Zavala, here to offer a lecture entitled, as you see, World Day of Migrants and Refugees, From Resilience to Integration. Many of you will recognize Father Luis as he joins us pretty regularly during the summers while he teaches here at Yale, and we're very happy to invite him back for this talk. Father Luis Eduardo Zavala de Alba is the founder and director of Casa, Monarca, a migrant shelter in Monterrey, Mexico, dedicated to protecting and integrating migrants and refugees. Father Luis earned a Ph.D. in international law from the Gregorian University in Rome, also a university I went to, so we have a nice connection there, and is a scholar of international law and human rights. He has spoken at UN forums on migrant rights. Father Luis has had fellowships here at Yale, at Harvard, and also in Barcelona, and consults internationally on democracy, migration, and human rights policy. He is a member of the Global Business and Human Rights Scholars Association and a graduate as well of Notre Dame's Inspired Leadership Initiative. So please join me in welcoming here for the talk this evening, Father Luis.
Well, I want to thank you all, and particularly I want to thank Father Joe and Father Greg. Throughout the summer, it's been such a great, I felt really welcome here. For the first time in ages, I felt like a part of the community. I used to attend on Sunday Mass, so I felt the community here increasing and vivid community. I'm so pleased and very honored to share some thoughts about our experience. I've always said that running a migrant and refugee shelter and living there is like a school of humanity. You can find the best of the people. What I've learned from them is this resilience, the way of thinking about how to strengthen themselves and get over many difficulties in the journey to look for a better life. So I've learned from that part of my life as a priest. But as well, I found many people in disgrace in such difficult moments and a lot of situations that I lived. And because of that, well, they have anger, they have bitterness, they have a lot of problems to integrate. That's why we would talk a little bit and make some thoughts regarding migration and refugees, particularly because what I believe it's, actually, I would like to begin with a video. I don't like it because it's not about me, it's about the shelter. But probably that will allow us to understand a little much better about the kind of work we're doing. This is, I'm going to put the micro here.
Soy sacerdote católico desde hace más de 30 años, además profesor y doctor en Derecho. Mi especialidad son los derechos humanos. Y hace ya 9 años que iniciamos esta labor, comenzamos trabajando con personas refugiadas en el programa de integración local y actualmente también con personas en tránsito que buscan llegar a Estados Unidos. Eso es Casa Monarca y ahorita desde hace 2 años tenemos nuestro albergue.
No hay palabras para agradecer todo lo que han hecho aquí por nosotros, por todas las familias que hacemos parte de esta casa. Los niños, el trato con los niños, nos han dado asistencia psicológica, nos han dado asistencia médica, nos dan las 3 comidas, contamos con una cama, con una ducha. Los niños estudian, asisten a la escuela. O sea, el trato ha sido muy humano. Por parte igual del padre Luis. El padre Luis es una persona que, aunque usted no lo crea, se sabe el nombre de todos los miembros de aquí de la casa. Una persona que tiene mucho contacto con siempre que le va a pasar por un lado le va a preguntar ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo te sientes? ¿Cómo te han tratado? Siempre está al pendiente de eso.
Y si nos falta nos dice.
Aquí la necesidad está 24/7, le damos el alojamiento, se les da de comer, se les atiende si traen una situación médica, si traen una situación psicológica. La mayoría de ellos son víctimas de mucha violencia. Si es un caso muy difícil, pues háblale al padre.
Pues es difícil que estemos 24 horas aquí. Entonces el doctor o el padre Luis precisamente también cumple la agenda y a partir de ahí pues bueno, uno se da cuenta que las formas de ayudar no simplemente pues es lo monetario y la calidad de tiempo que uno imprime con las personas a veces es más valiosa que la especie en sí. Pues el tiempo que estén aquí tengo que dar mi 100% o si no es que más. No es para mí, es para personas que necesitan un empujoncito.
No, de hecho el padre Luis no tiene descanso, la verdad. Si no tiene juntas, siempre tiene que estar buscando el recurso, siempre tiene que andar buscando donadores o quien nos ayude a la causa.
Yo en particular le he comentado a mi esposa y le he dicho que qué difícil sería estar ahorita en este clima, con estas condiciones, en un sitio, en la calle. Y por obra de Dios llegamos aquí en este lugar. Gracias a Dios aquí nos han recibido. De verdad, muchísimas gracias de corazón.
Pues creo que de esa manera también agradecer muchísimo esta oportunidad que nos brindan. Han pasado durante estos 2 años que hemos tenido más de 5,000 personas por la casa. Antes lo hacíamos entregando comidas en las vías del tren y íbamos llevando un registro también de las personas que servíamos. Entonces yo creo que hemos superado la misma cantidad de personas en tránsito desde que iniciamos.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So today, that the shelter is. There was a video made by one of the institutions from this side of the U.S. that they gave us a prize because we linked in work together when migrants used to be on transit, but since January 20th, everything changed. There's no migrants on transit anymore. We've got a sealed border. They have 8,000 National Guards. They have drones and jets all over the border. So that's why they reduced more than 90% to crossing, legally and illegally. But however, there's always, at least from a Christian perspective, from Catholic social teaching, but at the same time, when we think about migrants or refugees, particularly in this moment, as we might know, this is a very divisive topic, highly politicized, and because of that, I think it's important to think about some myths of migration, global trends. At the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, that's exactly what Father Joe mentioned. The most important message of this at the core of the World Days of Refugees and Migrants, the action verbs, which actually are very important to understand, and the conclusion and some Q&A at the end. And I would say that even today's gospel is exactly what we might consider about who's Lazarus now. If we think about it in perspective of having those even asking for a better life, we need to think about Lazarus for everywhere. Because there are a lot of myths of migration. The migration is at an all-time high. Borders are beyond control, but not anymore. The world is facing a refugee crisis that actually, from governance perspective, from political science, from all the concepts regarding how to deal with the refugees, everything is said actually. But we're having a lot of politicized issues, as you might know. Because of that, we need to rebuild the political science and to negotiate actually in that terms what Pope Francis used to say. Politics is quite important and is the highest level of charity because it's always looking for a common good. That is the highest level of charity, doing politics. And Christian Catholics must be involved in politics. So we need to think about our societies are more diverse than ever. Development is in poor countries will reduce migration. There are some theories as well. Immigration is a desperate flight from misery. We don't need migrant workers. Immigrants steal jobs and drive up wages. Immigration undermines the welfare state. Immigrants' integration has failed. Mass migration has produced mass segregation. Immigration sends crime rates soaring. Immigration leads to a brain drain. Immigration lifts all boats. We need immigrants to fix the problems of aging societies. Borders are closing down. Conservatives are tougher on immigration. Public opinion has turned against immigration. Smuggling is the cause of illegal migration. Trafficking is a formal modern of slavery. Border restriction reduce immigration. And climate change will lead to mass migration, the road ahead. All these myths are always a challenge how to implement the public policy for refugee and migrant crisis. We need to look at the global trends, particularly from United Nations High Commission for Refugees. In 123.2 million people forcibly displaced worldwide, an increasing number because of conflicts all over the world. 7 million more than 2023. 73% housing in low middle income countries, 67% housing in neighboring countries. 1 in 8 are displaced. You got this country, Lebanon, Aruba, 1 in 9, Curacao, 1 in 16, and Jordan, 1 in 18. 3.1 million new claims. That's why the US closed the borders. Look at the amount of people looking for refugees, and in the US it's not anymore even halted the refugee process of asylum seekers. Demographics of people who have been forcibly displaced in 2004, female and female. When we began with the shelter, we used to have 80% of male and 20% from female, but changed throughout the years. Now we've got 49% of women with kids all over the transit, well, been transiting inside Mexico, but not anymore to the U.S. I remember once a senator here in the U.S. used to claim that how on earth a mom put risk in their kids jumping into the train. And I remember saying, well, because they're looking for a better life, they're desperate to do so when the sea is probably safer than the land. That is why the same happened in the Mediterranean from the African countries to the European countries. That's why I have to make a confession. I miss a lot for Pope Francis, because since the very beginning of his papacy, he began going to Lampedusa when he claimed exactly, and he called out the issue, and he opened Rome and many parishes about how to deal with this sort of challenges for this society. And Pope Francis used to say it is necessary to respond to the globalization of migration with the globalization of charity and cooperation. And this is why I would like to begin with the first day of Migrant. He began in 2014 until the present World Migrants Day, with the different topics treated on this, each one of these. For instance, 2014, for the 100-day Migrants and Refugees Towards a Better World. A Church Without Frontiers, Mother to Call in 2015. In 2016, Migrants and Refugees challenged us to response of the Gospel of Mercy. 2017, Child Migrants, the Vulnerable of the Voiceless. And one particular, actually, we took our mission as a shelter from this 2018 World Day of Refugees and Migrants, welcoming, protecting, promoting, and integrating migrants and refugees. Those 4 words we will talk about later. And then building the future with migrants and refugees in 22, 21, towards an ever wider we. And this is actually from the narrative to separate we, us, them. We're trying to extend what we believe that we find about migrants and refugees. Like Jesus Christ forced to the flee, welcoming, protecting displaced persons in 2010 and 20. It's not just about migrants. This was actually very important. I recommend you just to look at this because it's the main idea. And when Pope Francis talks about, it's not just about migrants. It's about our society. It's about our compassion. It's about how we deal with people from different backgrounds and nationality, creeds, and how we deal with that service. And it's not about migrants. It's a wider topic to meditate and to think about it. Free in 2023, it was a very important as well because Pope Francis free to choose whether to migrate or to stay. The international legal obligation from the state to respond to create development condition in order to stop migration. Pope Francis used to be accused because of he was protecting just migrants. But no, he always speak up regarding how to tackle with this issue. We need to do your work as a state and to create conditions of development in order to migrants stay in the country. God worked with his people in 2024, and this year for the Migrant and Refugee Day, Pope Leo, because of Pope Francis, decided to Migrants, Missionary of Hope, because of the World Day of Missionaries. That's why we will consider this throughout this presentation. And my scope is about the obligation of different actors from the states. Migrants and refugees are not pawns of the chessboard of humanity. We need to think about universal network of collaboration founded on the protection of dignity and the centrality of the person, back to the idea of who's Lazarus. Develop a more just and equitable economic and financial order worldwide. I know exactly that it's exactly because of problems of economy and inequality all over the world, with a greater commitment to peace. Migration cannot be reduced merely to its political and regulatory dimensions, although we used to say actually it's important even when we think about public policy and human rights. I just want to be focused not only on human rights-based approach, but as well in human rights faith approach. When we think about that, we got the presence of economic implications and different cultures. From the state, the rights of the state must be combined with the obligation to respect dignity. And we are called to have the utmost respect for dignity of every migrant. This is a part of the obligation, how to build the public policy taking into this situation, particularly from every state. From us as a society, the culture of rejection and the culture of encounter. Pope Francis used to think about the culture of encounter. We must respond to the globalization of migration with the globalization of charity and cooperation, cultivate a culture of encounter where we are willing not only to give, but also to receive from others. The value of each institution is measured by the way it treats human life and dignity, especially in situations of vulnerability. The globalization of difference, another mention about today's gospel, and we cannot leave the responsibility of decisions that need to be made now for the future generation. I think that's the most important thing in order to change the narrative, at least from the church. We're tempted to be Christians while maintaining a prudent distance from the Lord's wants. Migrants and refugees, you occupy a special place in the heart of the church, and you help to have a bigger heart. The phenomenon of migration is not separate from the history of salvation. It indeed is part of it. Indifference and silence pave the way of complicity. Only one we, as big as all of humanity, and a living image of the people of God on the journey toward eternal homeland. And that's the most important thing into the message of each one of these World Days. Special attention to groups, theological foundations, actors in migration, the collective action we need to think about it, the role of the state, migrants and refugees, and what is the content of this action verse. When we talk about the special attention of groups, we need to think about not only refugees, but as well forcibly displaced persons. We need to think about family, children and young. And I would like to mention that as a shelter, one of the big challenges we've got is migrants and refugees, kids coming and how to schooling. And we signed an agreement in the process of building a local governance. We negotiate with the state, a local state, how can we do in order to include in school children coming to our shelter. And they accepted. And because of that, as soon as they arrive to the shelter, the third day, they are really with the school nearby the shelter. Migrants in a regular situation. When we talk about human rights-based approach, there's the possibility to build a governance and public policy on migrants, but the great challenge is about the due process of regularization. And it's exactly that affects already the problem of stopping, for instance, asylum seekers and the international refugee law and the institution involved in this process. And of course, migrant workers. When we talk about the theological foundation, frequently used reference to biblical text is supposed theological reflection that serve exactly as a foundation for understanding the phenomena of forced displacement and its challenges. The first refugees in the world was Jesus, Mary, and Joseph fleeing from his homeland to Egypt. The experience of salvation, the meaning and content of the people of Israel, the Hebrew, means people on the move. The experience of the people of God in the Old Testament, those who leave their land, exile, or foreigners and pilgrim. And the New Testament, migration from the perspective of Jesus Christ, the welcome that Christian must offer to the stranger. Jesus is the stranger who asks for shelter, who suffer, is exiled, beggar, and discriminated against. I was coming from the airport yesterday, and when I took this Uber, I remember a guy from Dominican Republic. They say, we feel discriminated here in many places. We need to fight against xenophobia and racism. Because of that, we need to link our faith with the way we treat others. The reflection related to the immigrant community as a people of God, as enriching for host communities, as a part of the one single church and the universal brotherhood, and which other actors, immigration and the responsibilities. From migrants, one of the challenge of God is about their participation in host societies. It's not about creating yet what has happened in France, for instance, with the Muslim community. It was quite difficult and challenging for the French government to include into the process of trying to encourage to be involved. Local churches in countries of origin and destination. There was a very good attempt in the past month, but I would say past year, between the Bishop Conference from Central America and Mexico and the U.S. were working together to create a kind of pathway for citizenship in each of these countries and how to support migrants in local churches. The countries of origin, the way they're welcoming, the laity and the commitment to humanize societies and fight for the promotion of justice and human dignity. The states and their inclusion of control policies, and of course, host communities. The collective action, the state, society, and Christians, what the kind of assistance we're doing for migrants, departure, transit, and arrival, improving the living condition of migrants and promoting a new economic order that guarantees a dignified life and reduce inequality, the promotion of social integration, the hospitality instead of xenophobia, and the duty of Christian solidarity transcends any legislation. And what is the role of the society? We need to think about the migration is not just an administrative problem. When we think about, it's not about how to administrate the migration, but it's how to manage. And the management of migration requires international cooperation, solidarity, compassion. And to see migrants and refugees not as just a problem to be faced, but as people, human beings, brothers and sisters, and we welcome and respect it. One, besides of the shelter, it's a school of humanity. I remember once when I tried to make a discernment, even to stay at the shelter and move into the next of my life. I remember once at Notre Dame in a group that I was sharing about my concern regarding what to do next after this, after the shelter. And you know this, change one person and change the world. And then we realized that every migrant, every family, every child coming to a shelter, we're trying to touch their lives and do better for them. And the acceptance of a series of obligation to integrate the host country, respecting its law, the national identity. That's why Pope Francis used to say, our shared response may be articulated by 4 verbs: to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate. In 2008, we took these verbs, and actually it's already at the entrance of our shelter. In a way, we took that from Matthew 25:35, because I was hungry, because I was thirsty, and you gave me food, and I was welcomed. Welcoming, which means to offer a broader options for migrants or refugees to enter destination countries safely and legally. Protecting, steps intended to defend the rights and dignity of migrants or refugees, independent of their legal status. Promoting, efforts to ensure that all migrants or refugees, as well as the communities which welcome them, are empowered to achieve their potential as human beings in all dimensions, even capabilities. And challenges is the integrating, to work towards refugees and migrants participating fully in the life of their whole society in a dynamic of mutual enrichment. And that is the process to integrate that we're doing right now with the shelter. Of course, to participate fully in the life of the whole society through education, through employment, looking for housing, co-development in the process of building a public policy, implementation public policy for migrants and refugees, health, and social services. These are not just, we're talking about duties, we're talking about as well human rights and access to justice through the process of regularization, but at the same time, access to health, access to education, because it's part of the human rights obligation. And how we conceive these integration policies. When we talk about welcoming, we need to look at the principle of equality and non-discrimination. And welcoming is about narrative. Welcoming is about how do we treat others from different cultures, perspective, religion, and we all know about how important is the way we communicate. As it's simple, I remember here at Yale and Notre Dame many times when I've heard illegal aliens, although it's in the legal word, we not make, because no human being is illegal. We want to think about even from that point of departure in order to understand no human being is illegal. It's undocumented, and because of that, we wanted to deal with principle of equality and non-discrimination. That is the first verb of welcoming. And protecting how to create the condition, principle of citizenship, the promoting the process of inclusion, and integrating the principle of interculturality. And Pope Francis used to say the value of every institution is measured on how it treats human life and dignity, especially in situations of vulnerability. If we think about government perspective and the role of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, we need to look at how it treated, at least from this human life and dignity, how they treat others, how they, and we all know in every media about the way they treat others. And what actually next week we'll be celebrating with Pope Leo on this 111 Refugee Day, what we mentioned in the last one of the statement, my thank you, which is the thank you of the entire church for your witness, extends and renews that of Pope Francis. Thank you to the associations, the volunteers, the mayors, the administration that have succeeded one another at a time. Thank you to the priests, the doctors, the security forces, and all those who often invisibly have shown and showed the smile and the attention of a human face to the people who have survived in the desperate journey of hope. You are a bulwark of humanity. There is no justice without compassion. There is no legitimacy without listening to the pain of others. And what is exactly 111 World Refugee Day? Migrants, Missionary of Hope. Pope Leo recalled the duties of the state, the society, and the states, and the church as well. Looking after particular interests alone constitutes a serious threat to the allocation of responsibilities. Multilateral cooperation, the common good, and global solidarity for the benefit of all humanity. The society, the presence of migrants and refugees must be recognized and valued as a true opportunity for openness. And the church, communities that welcome migrants and refugees can be a living witness to a society in which all are recognized as children of God, in which all are brothers and sisters, part of a single family. This is the 111 World Day of Migrants and Refugees. And I want to make some kind of remarks and conclusions for this and get into debate and questions, because I think that the way we focus on migrants and refugees, the way we build the narrative, the way we approach into the process of not only human rights-based approach, but as well human rights faith approach. As we might know, human rights are the secular gospel, but we translate into the challenge to build a society where education is of the social phenomenon of migrants and refugees leads to the opportunity to have a better societies. And how to reduce the xenophobia, how the way we communicate and we convey to one another the idea of why they're coming from. And of course, I think challenging as well is how to build a governance based on not only dignity, but as well the role of the state, the institutions, the way they treat others, the way they're building the governance, the actors involved, the society, the Catholics into the government, putting pressure into a better condition for them. I was just looking at the interview this morning from the Mexican president saying we deal with Marco Rubio in order to stop the raids in the U.S. and trying to have a better understanding. It's still a challenging issue, but it's going to eventually going to affect the economy, eventually going to impact as well the wages in the U.S., eventually going to have problems about the way they probably administrate migration instead of management this situation. And finally, and I think this is the most important, is if at home, if in our local community, what kind of pastoral work we're doing regarding involving migrants and refugees in the process of integration and interculturality. The way we're involved trying to push in the narrative in order to avoid xenophobia and racism. The way we believe in human dignity. Actually, one of the main documents from Pope Francis called Human Dignity, it was how the infinitus dignitas, infinite the dignity, no matter what country they're coming from, but from faith perspective, we need to look at the infinite of the dignity in each one of these people. I know it's quite challenging. For instance, at local level, we're dealing with the local government in order to create and pass a bill for the 4 groups. And hopefully, at the end of the month, we will have a new bill in the state and local government in order to protect migrants in transit, refugees, displaced, and the 4 groups are the migrant, refugee, displaced people and transit coming to our country. Monterrey is a financial hub, but at the same time, it's a city of many companies and factories hiring desperate people. That's why next Wednesday we will have 126 refugees. Every 2 or 3 weeks, we have more than 150 refugees coming to our shelter. They translate from the south to the north. At the past, we used refugees used to just leave the program because they want to reach the U.S., but not anymore. So we are having right now all of them in the process of inclusion in Monterrey, having conditions in order to protect through housing, shelter, medical assistance, but as well having schooling for the kids. So we are in that process of building a local governance. So we can reply every situation in these communities, how the role we're involved, and the way we're looking how to help migrants and refugees. And the idea we've got, once they decided to leave the country, and how it's going to be involved eventually in politics, and how to depoliticize this issue in order to think in terms of humanity, solidarity, compassion, and even thinking about if they're Lazarus and we're not wealthy people, we need to think about how to get involved eventually and help migrants and refugees. The Catholic Conference, U.S. Catholic Conference Bishops, has been doing, throughout the years, a lot of involvement with the True Conference, and that's why we're trying to support the idea how to deal with this. In particular, most of the responsibility, I remember once last year, a Catholic professor in Notre Dame said, it was fault of the Catholic Church. It was the fault of the Catholic Church not to be involved because we never learned the roots and the causes of migration. So as a Catholic Church, we want to think about how we are going to educate in this social phenomenon, how we're going to be a least and to speak up for those who are fleeing because the country have a difficulty to survive. When we think about migrants and refugees, what comes in our minds is not just about they're fleeing the country because of war, conflict, and different situation. 8.5 million Venezuelans left the country. And although it's really a threat of a war in the Caribbean with the U.S. and Venezuela, the people still fleeing from Venezuela to Colombia, to Mexico, and many countries even in Europe. So this is a social phenomenon we need to re-educate inside our Catholic communities. We need to speak up regarding Lazarus coming and knocking our doors and trying to get a better life. And in my experience as a Catholic priest, I've learned a lot from each one of them. And I said at the beginning, and I would like just to open for the Q&A, it's about the resilience they've got. It's about the hope they build inside their hearts for a better life, the way they educate their children, because children realize at the end they're looking for a better life. It was difficult for their teenagers. We have now about 21 teenagers at the shelter. And it's amazing the way of thinking, how they encourage their parents. They understood at the end, throughout the journey, why they flew around the countries and why and doing a better life. Now, from that 21, 18 about, they are already in the school, and they feel the difference, and they feel now in the process of integration. That it depends on each one of us how we conceive. It's not only about politics, and actually there was a politician who say, politics is very important because it's about common good. And we cannot allow politicians just to be involved in this issue, because when you think about the terms, and we're welcoming, protecting, promoting, and integrating refugees. Thank you so much, and I'm welcome to receive some questions and share my experience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Father Luis. And yes, for those who are interested in asking a question or perhaps making a comment on the presentation, you're more than welcome to come forward to the microphone to do so. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Diego. I'm from Mexico. I just came here to study, chasing the American dream. That's still a thing. I mean, there's going to be a lot of information, but, well, I feel like all this topic gets very politicized because of all the violence and all the bad things that come with immigration. You don't control many things, like drug trafficking, human trafficking, all those things are kind of like related, but at the same time not. It's a dangerous path. Like, I cannot think about how terrible life for them is to decide to cross the entire continent to maybe have a chance to have a better life. So with that, I just wanted to ask, what are the steps, or what can we do to help immigrants to get to their place that they want to be? I mean, whether if it's in the US or not, but to like keep them away from that kind of dangerous path that it seems inevitable for them to not cross paths with that dangerous other path. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Diego. Well, actually, I myself lived a process of discernment about I cannot change this phenomenon. But I'm so keen to do something regarding following at least basic steps. And at the beginning, is trying to convince people that we have to deal with this issue in one way or another, because eventually it's going to affect us a lot. So, for instance, at a local level, we knew that because people are desperate for work. So migration responds to demography, but as well for labor force. So they're looking for a better life because they want to get a job. And when we think about the society, and eventually it's going to affect a lot, and a lot of implication for those who are now even undocumented to be deported, we need to look at how are we going to the due process of regularization regarding the due process of law. And if this is a country, a democratic country with high values, and even a culture of how to recognize the importance of not only to be deported because ICE rights, because they deserve the due process of law before getting to deportation process. It's not about the issue that are here, they've been here for ages. It's because how the law is being respected. And because of why we need to build a culture of legality and the due process of law, I understand that it's important not only to look at the media and be informed because of the media, because we need to look at democratic values, we need to look at the due process of law, we need to look at the civil society involvement at the end of the day. Of course, there are many fears about migrants and refugees, but most is about myths, not about how to deal with the reality. So the next step is a local level. What we're doing, what kind of a challenge we've got. If we're receiving migrants, not anymore refugees, are they documented or not undocumented? How we deal with these sort of issues, a local community. have we the opportunity to get into the due process of law regarding not to be deported, but have access to a lawyer, and because of that, probably eventually not to be deported to El Salvador, to the SECOD, which is actually now made mostly for the U.S., and of course with a lot of issue regarding the lack of the process of law. So I want to think about our whole culture regarding how we respect rights and how we conceive human rights and dignity. And through that, I would say we need to create the atmosphere to believe that there's not everything is about against migrants or refugees. It's about the depoliticization process and building local governance or a national governance regarding migrants and refugees. There are a lot of challenges because of that. And I think the point of departure would be we need to re-educate us in trying to think about not only as a us, but as a we. We are one people, one humanity, and we need to reconsider how to treat others. And if we back to today's gospel, if I'm privileged, if I'm living a wealthy life, if I've been educated, if I've been committed on doing something for someone, we need to look how are we eventually involved to help people in need as migrants and refugees. That would be the steps I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other question? Reflection? Yeah, thank you. Insights? Thoughts?
Hi, my name is Dana. I'm originally from Colombia, and I'm a student at the law school here. My question is about rhetoric and how to engage with those who seek to politicize this issue of migration and immigration, particularly those who use the Christian faith to quote unquote back up these ideals that are very xenophobic.
Yeah.
And I have refrained from engaging in these conversations because I don't really know what to say to someone who pretends to use faith to justify xenophobia, and I was wondering what your advice might be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that is a challenge. When we need to think about how eventually get involved in rhetoric and how we're educating others to understand at the very deep level of migration process, why throughout the years and how it's actually built this country regarding country of migrants. We all know, we have heard a lot of this issue, but I think the point of departure is how we feel and how we are eventually involved in the local communities or in the process of re-educating ourselves. And from a due process of law, the regularization is a right. So the asylum seeker is part of international refugee law. When we think about the international legal obligation, we need to put pressure into the state to fulfill legal obligations. And probably because of it's the same with public international law, it's the same at the for instance, national and international treaties. Now the UST, the former NAFTA and now the U.S. Mexican-Canada agreement, we're in the process of negotiating. But at the first time, the issue of labor and the dignity of people has been involved in the process how to integrate mass of people coming to our countries, housing countries, because they responded to the job forces. And because of that, we need to look at how is the way we're thinking the process of integration, how is being involved in international community through development, how we raise this awareness about it's not only about xenophobia and racism, it's about ourselves and the way we're being educated as a Christian community on one hand, but as well how we deal with other people when they think differently about that. And how can we negotiate from governance perspective, how we negotiate from the process of integration, and sometimes even challenging the way when we see someone in a different culture coming to our world, how we extend that world to understand how it's coming from, why he came here. And if they're looking for a better life, we need to get involved in trying to make them that path a better life. But now I think it's about speak up about how to build local communities, how to engage into the idea of this is a political issue, how to depoliticize in order to build a governance. And we talk about governance and political science is about the different actors involved. What is the role of the state regarding a local level with the process of law? How is the role of the society involved protecting migrants or refugees because they have a right? And how a local level, what kind of bills you're doing, although migration is a federal competence, we need to look at local communities, putting pressure into local legislative process to put at least aside the due process of law for regularization. And I think that one venue. But the other hand is ourselves. We need to think about if I have our own issues regarding others because they have different perspective about life, about grades, about moral even approach. We need to think about we are just a common and shared humanity. And I think it's back to the basics. And sometimes the way we approach to others, even we as foreigners coming to this country, how to get involved in a local community, accepting others, even the way of thinking and how to have this approach in order to build a better society. I was saying today to the young guys in Mass, well, what is our position regarding to get involved in the life we've got and the way we invite others to live the same kind of living we've got. And when we create this awareness about we're privileged, and we're in a society that we have received a lot, we need to do something regarding others. And I think it's a lot of conceptual issues, but we need to put pressure into the state, into society, and to re-educate in order to have a better, to push others to have a better life that we have. I think that is the approach. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here for this important topic. My name is Kaveh Kushnut. I'm a faculty at the Yale School of Public Health. I was born in Iran, and the country, of course, has gone through a lot of political violence, and I had to escape the country when I was a teenager, and I'm here now. I'm always asking myself, what is the contribution and the role of academic institutions? How can we do all the work that you're mentioning? Obviously, we are not policymakers, but how can we support policymakers and also organizations that are actually taking care of refugees, forced migrants?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and I would insist, because when you have this normal, looking for a better life or American dream, and what involved the American dream, and you got into this, and you think about others coming to this country, and the point of the pattern, we think about what is the role of the state right now, and what kind of people are trying to depoliticize and eventually get involved and have local instances, and the impact of local instances to receive migrants and refugees. It is possible, although insist is part of the federal competence. If we look at the role of civil society in a local, you make it different. It happened in New York. It happened in Boston. It happened in many cities, although they're not the most central cities. But for instance, in many cities in California, it depends a lot on agricultural of Mexicans coming to pick up fruit and vegetables. They're defending now a local level with a lot of efforts in order to stop the deportations. And senators and legislators are doing everything in order to create the condition to stop the riots because they have due process of law at the very end. We've heard a lot about this, but it's always about the common humanity. We need to reconsider the shared values, the idea of there is always a way of thinking and due process of law to receive someone who is fleeing from a country. There are international legal obligations supporting humanitarian law. We all know about the process on this country holding refugees and asylum seekers. But there are many other countries. I remember the very first time, 2018, we received a donation from the U.S. government because the president wanted to stop in Mexico supporting refugees. And we received a big donation from the U.S. government in order to build our shelter. But it changed through the anti-immigrant narrative. And many people, of course, supporting this idea of anti-immigrant. So that is why it's important to rebuild the process of governance and thinking about, okay, if we trying to struggle at local level for a better condition for those living in the city, I think it's possible to create a condition to support people who's right now, instead of supporting the idea of deporting, because they're going to face a very difficult situation. And again, the separation of families. So at least I would say that if we are involved in one way or another, thinking for a common good, we need to get involved eventually, how the next step at local level, in order to reduce or to support the idea of having legal condition for those who supposed to be here documented. I think we need to, and of course, and because of you mentioned before, it's a big issue regarding of health policies for refugees as well. How they get involved in having this access to health, and how many society or different civil society organization, Catholic local churches involved in how to help people to have access to health, and many Catholic hospitals doing the same good job regarding how to help refugees. And I think that raising this awareness, not only about the stuff and saying, no, I can't do anything because of that, I'm not getting involved. It's exactly because we need a common good. We need to rethinking about the shared human, the shared common humanity when it is support the idea of it's exactly what we should do in order to protect dignity. Thank you so much, Gavin. Oh, thank you so much.
Padre Luis, we spoke earlier, and I think some people know that what I shared with you, that I'm also an immigrant to the United States. I've been living here only just 10 years. And I want to start with humor in my question. I don't know if you heard the joke of El Argentino en Toronto, Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a joke about this guy from Argentina that goes to Canada, and he loves, the first months until it starts to snow. And you can imagine the rest and how he dreams about going back to Argentina. And so there is a point when you are an immigrant in this country where you start longing for home. Maybe it is because of isolation. You don't, even if you want to, you just don't, integrate. And so I'm wondering if you have witnessed throughout your years of service in Monterrey some sort of reverse migration, and how does that look like if you have seen that phenomenon?
Yeah, actually, we had no other choice rather than redesign our mission, because of course we used to support migrants on transit, but the transit been reduced 90%. I mean, people here in the U.S. is happy because they're not illegal and undocumented people trying to enter illegally in this country, which is, I think, the sovereignty of state, which is, people agreed on that. But we need to think about the idea of recovering the way of thinking on how we deal with this, not only politically, but as well economically, geographically, demographically, and that sort of different perspective of migration. What I've learned now is a time of sociologists, anthropologists, and those involved in humanities, that we need to look at how to deal with this issue, because it's kind of worried about people raising of xenophobia and racism, people's being educated and a different perspective about who is he, who's she, and because of that we need to think about how to rebuild the idea of common and shared humanity. Because of the role of science through anthropologists and sociologists, we need to look why we're having this sort of internal struggling, because having other differences we need to have to deal with. I remember having here one student from different country that I have certain differences, and the way of thinking immediately came up about because I'm immigrant, because I have a different perspective about or ideologically differences on terms of how to integrate migrants. So we need to get into the idea of these different social sciences involved in the process of integration. We need to rethink the way of how to help others to understand that this is a very wide and difficult problem, because that's not only solved by politicians. It's been solved by those who are really concerned about what are we sharing as a humanity, as a common good, as a building a society, as a shared values, as a respecting other people's rights, as the freedom of thoughts and conscience and religion, and the way we treat others. And that's why that's why we got towards an ever wider we. And once the 2021 World Refugee and Migrants Day, trying to create this awareness, how are we going to have a wider we instead of us and them? And because of that is the role of the anthropologists and sociologists to get involved eventually. How are we going to create the condition to get into this process? And I think that's the challenge. When we come here and back to our communities, we see the difference, culturally speaking, and even the way we treat others. But we're really thankful for this country, what we've received, the way we're supported, the kind of the many Catholics involved in the well-being of many people. And I think it's the idea of the Catholic Church now, because I had in my mind this professor at Notre Dame saying, it's a fault of the Catholic Church not being involved in educate in a common and shared humanity. We need to recover the idea of we're celebrating the same mystery, and because we're celebrating the same mystery, we're sharing our community as a whole. And because of that, we need to get involved in one way or another, how to educate people in that. I think we're going back instead of going forward. I think we're trying to step aside instead of getting involved in common good. I think we have a lot of challenges in our minds, in our hearts, in order to accept others because they have different perspective of life. And I think it's not very useful to get involved in useless discussions about migration and refugees. We need to get involved in every person coming and knocking at the door of a country because they're looking for a better life that we all have. And how are creating the condition to solve through different perspective about the community and protecting our communities regarding how to deal with this sort of issues and the challenge we got and the young generation in order to accept. I think it's easier for the young generations to understand among them because they got a perspective because of globalization. So, but this is the other generation, those who are going to take decisions about others. I think, and I remember that my students throughout the summer session, they have this lack of understanding about politics and kind of delusion about politicians. And we need to back to the idea of politics is very serious not to get involved. And if we think about politicians, we need to look at they're supposed to be looking for a common good. And the way you're involved in raising the voice for those politicians to, instead of creating the condition to unite people and instead of polarize and division, we need to do something regarding how to start a dialogue. Even, and it's a very delicate and sensitive issue when we talk about what happened with Charlie Kirk, even he was open to dialogue. Even he has his own position regarding migrants. He changed eventually his mind a little bit, at least, when he created the condition for negotiate about the due process of law, for instance, because he was a clever guy. So we need to think about to reopen the idea of having a conversation on how to reduce the polarization regarding migrants and refugees. I think the state has the sovereignty to do whatever it wants in order to not to raise the level, the number of refugees coming and asylum seekers to this country. But however, they already have 1 million people undocumented, and it's very challenging for a comprehensive reform and bipartisan reform for migration in this country. And I think this is the part we have to do with those who are supporting this idea. I mean, the comprehensive reform. I remember once as well having this conversation with someone in the legislative saying it's quite difficult because what totally different perspective of migrants and refugees in this country, but it's possible to create politics because, for instance, the U.S. government supporting during the unaccompanied minor 2016 millions of dollars to help unaccompanied minors, and they reached a public policy on that. If U.S. government reached in that position to help undocumented children, I think we can create the condition for a more comprehensive reform between a bipartisan comprehensive reform of migration. I think that is the challenge. We need to raise this awareness of that. Okay, well, I want to thank you again and again for this opportunity. It's been really excited on this dialogue. I would like to hear not voices from abroad, but rather than from here. And I think today's gospel is completely on the way we need to think seriously about the kind of life we've got, the privilege we are. Although we worked so hard to have a living, my parents have worked so hard to having a very good condition, and I'm pleased to be raised in a Catholic family and then become a priest. And because of that, I understand it's a kind of fighting every day and struggling to better world. And now I choose to do it through migrants and refugees. And I cordially invited you to come and touch migrants in a shelter. That's made the life different. Just touch a shelter. Touch the life of refugees. Touch the life of people coming and suffering and looking for a better life. And that's changed completely your mind and your life. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Father Luis, and hopefully we all have the opportunity at some point to come visit you and take you up on the offer there to visit the shelter and see the work firsthand that you're doing there. So thank you again for your work and for your talk today. Just wanted to give you a heads up about our upcoming lectures. The next one for our series is 3 weeks from now. It's on October 19th, and that is part of our Catholic faculty series. We're inviting Maureen Long, who's a professor in the Department of Geology and Geophysics, to have a conversation with us regarding faith in the academic sphere. So please join us again on October 19th. And also the week after, on October 26th, we welcome New York Times columnist Ross Douthat, who will offer a book talk on his latest publication entitled Believe, Why Everyone Should Be Religious. And also, please feel free to use the QR code on your table to let us know what you think about today's lecture. And thank you once again for being with us today.
So Professor, I'll wait for the evaluation, pre-due evaluation. I will hear from you, please.